So let's have a look at Jonah chapter 1, thinking about a person struggling with God. So the first thing we do is we simply read it. What does it say? Read it and understand the story. Jonah is called by God to go to Nineveh, but instead he goes in the opposite direction. He looks out to the sea, and instead of going one way, he chooses to go exactly the opposite direction. And then he gets caught in the storm. The sailors are forced to throw him overboard. That's the story. He ends up sinking down into the sea, being caught up in the fish. What does it mean? We've understood the words now. Let's try and dig a bit deeper into the understanding of the meaning. What does it mean? You've Jonah, this prophet, this person struggling with God. A prophet struggling with God. He's a man who worships God. Look at verse 9. But it's not straightforward, is it, for him? He's struggling with God. He's struggling with the call that God has placed in his life. He's trying to flee from the hold that God has over him. For us to know God and to be in a relationship with God is often a very complicated thing. In fact, probably always a complicated thing, isn't it? Because relationships with people are difficult. Relationships with God, the Almighty, Holy, Invisible God, are difficult. Knowing God and who He is, surrendering to God and His authority. Two big things, to know God and who He is, and then to surrender to that God and to His authority over our lives. Think about those men in the boat and think about Jonah. Those men in the boat who knew nothing about God, trying to wrestle with who He is. Who is this God who's causing storms in the ocean? Think about Jonah. Knows who God is, worships God, but struggling to surrender to Him. Think for a minute about Jonah's willingness to throw himself overboard, and the sailors' fear of killing him. A really complex, difficult situation where they're wrestling with right and wrong. Who's good and who's doing the right thing? Ponder sometimes the complexity of these choices that we have to make in our relationship with God and with others. What it says, and now we've looked at what it means. The final thing we think about is, so what? So what? What does this story, this chapter, this part of God's Word, what is God saying to me today? What is this about in my life? Application is often the hardest step. It's about your personal response. If you have a train of thought that God has led you to think about something, follow it. Think about it, ponder it. Allow God to take you deeper and deeper into what He would say to you. Or here's some other questions you might want to think about. What do Jonah and the other sailors learn about God in this chapter? What do you learn about God in this chapter? What are your biggest struggles with God? In your relationship with God, what is the big struggle that you're having at the moment? Are you running towards God or away from God? Maybe you're a bit like Jonah in the middle of the story there, where he's asleep and really pretty unaware and resigned. Where are you in your relationship with God? So, what is God saying to you? What truth or insight do you need to act upon?